wanting to die with dignity. Do we have the right to choose? Once again, I'm going to ask all of you to gather your thoughts and scan that QR code on your table and tell us whether you want to choose how to die. That's the big question before us today as the world is discussing passive euthanasia, active euthanasia, assisted death, also known as assisted suicide. Nisha Bambani is a lawyer with the Supreme Court of India. She's worked in this area. Guru Gauranga Das is with us, and Smriti Rana works in the area of palliative care. Dr. Sanjeev Bagay is a well-known doctor. He's from the Nephron Clinics and has worked in this area as well, and has had to face these questions in his career about whether the doctor has the right to die, to choose, in fact, or play God in that sense, or to choose or assist somebody in dying. Is that a dilemma before the doctors? I'm going to begin by asking Guruji here, do we have the right to choose? If a patient is terminally ill, does that patient have the right to decide, or do the family members have the right to decide whether they want to choose death in a certain way or not? Is that something that should be allowed?
In the Manusmriti, in the Islamic tradition, in the Christian tradition, all spiritual traditions, they focus on the sanctity of life. There is a focus on karma and dharma and the right to perform our duty and tolerate pain. Therefore, in all the traditions, this kind of active euthanasia is not at all supported and promoted. At one point of time, there used to be a concept known as prayopavesha, which is described in our scriptures. But that is where a sadhaka towards the end of his life voluntarily gives up eating and things like that with a spiritual goal in mind, but not this medical intervention as far as our scriptural tradition is concerned.
Our results are out, and the audience thinks that 53% of them feel that they have the right to choose how they die. 47% of them think that no, that's something that should be left to God and nature. That's against nature is what I'm presuming many of them would think. Smriti Rana, you work in the area of palliative care. You deal with patients who are terminally ill, have no hope. You see them up close. Just tell us, how many of them want to die?
Okay, so if I can just reframe that a little bit. I think death is the inevitable consequence of living. How many want to die, it depends on the level of their suffering. And I think when we talk about the right to die with dignity, we have to remember that dignity, the lack of dignity might come from two things. One is lack of pain relief and symptom control, or sometimes it's excessive, disproportionate interventions when there is no hope for recovery or cure or for a reasonable quality of life. When patients come to us asking to die, we try and assess what level of their suffering is causing them to ask that. And I would say with fair success, we have been able to address the suffering, and I would say a majority of them retract that request. Although I want to say that euthanasia is illegal in India, and it's not something we would ever grant. But yeah.
What is legal in the country right now is passive euthanasia, which the Supreme Court has allowed in the year 2018. It's also allowed the concept of people having the right to choose whether they want the withdrawal of life support systems or not beyond a point. It's called the living will. I want Nisha to talk a little about living will. Everybody has the right to have a legal piece of, document, a legal piece of document which details on how I would want to die. If I'm in a condition where I'm terminally ill, I don't want to be put on the ventilator, that is my right today. Nisha.
Yes. So Sneha, that's interesting because the Supreme Court decision Common Cause in 2018 has asked Parliament to legislate on living will. However, they have said that passive euthanasia is legal and is included in Article 21. So they've given a complete, Supreme Court has laid down a complete manner where it will not be misused. That's one of the questions which will arise. And you can give what is now called advance directive. Now, somebody who wants an advance directive that if I am terminally ill and there's no chance of recovery, please don't put me with a dialysis, central line, arterial line. Just let me go in as natural death, when life just ebbs away. What happens then is that there is a full, you have to go to the medical board, and there is you have to get your thing registered with the jurisdictional district magistrate. That advance directive, which is not called living will, has to be registered. So there are various things that you have to do, and after that, it is recognized, yes. And even after that, the medical board will have to certify that, yes, you are terminally ill and you are on the verge of death.
My question is, I'm going to put that to Dr. Bagai, that there are many people who India allows patients to there should be passive euthanasia if so the patient and the family feels, if the patient is in a vegetative state. But there are patients who are miserable. They may not be in a vegetative state, but they could still be miserable. And perhaps that's the reason why, and we could have that up also here, about the number of countries that have allowed euthanasia, assisted suicide. Physician-assisted suicide being allowed by Netherlands, by Belgium. We know it's in Switzerland as well, where Switzerland actually allows foreigners, from different countries to go to their country and die on their soil, which these countries don't allow. But it's legal in many other countries of the world, including 10 states in the US. So why is that the developing world is looking at it? Why should India not look at it?
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Okay. And thank you, India Today, for inviting me. It's a topic which is very close to my heart. I think in our Bible, in our Bhagavad Gita of medicine, called as Harrison, the first chapter, first line is that there is no greater responsibility which can fall on human shoulders than to become a physician. And the one who carries this with sympathy, tact, and empathy towards the patients does humanity proud. A patient is not a bed number. The patient is not a ward number. Patient is not a disease. A patient is a living soul who reaches out to us as medical professionals seeking help, seeking healing. Doctors are not God. What is important to understand is see the Indian context. I'll just take a couple of minutes, please, with your permission. We have 1.5 billion population. Healthcare, what we define in India, where this whole issue of living will, active versus passive euthanasia falls on our shoulders, is not the large corporate hospitals which we see in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Hyderabad, and other places. 80% of Indian healthcare is unstructured in less than 50-bed hospitals. Most of them are unregistered. They are non-accredited. We are 10 lakh doctors short. We are 75% shortage of specialists. How is this going to be implemented? Any law has to be scalable and sustainable, implementable, and enforceable. If any one of these four pillars cracks, the law doesn't work. So in that context, I do not agree with the judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court, and allow me a minute to explain why. And I have gone through these judgments very carefully. They have used interchangeably and inexcusably the word of withdrawal of treatment versus withholding of treatment. The two cannot be interchanged. They are not equivalent. It's a differentiation between act of omission and act of commission. Therefore, the fine line between active and passive euthanasia gets eroded very quickly. In the interiors, outside the major metropoles, this kind of implementation in which the decision-making falls on the doctor's shoulders, we are the moral agency. We are here to treat, we are here to save. We cannot save every life. That's law of nature. But our efforts should be 100% honest, ethical, and transparent. And therefore, if we are put in a decision-making under the wheels of the guillotine, it is unfair, it is wrong, it is unethical. This is liable to be used, blatantly misused, violated, exploited in various nooks and corners of this country. Be it for property, be it for inheritance, be it for lack of finances, be it for lack of insurance, for any other reason. On one hand, we are saying, save the girl child. We are going to see this and we are already seeing it. Lastly, life itself is a miracle. It's the most beautiful thing we should value. It's a essence of our being.
But what about the suffering? What about the suffering of the
I
patient?
will tell you. Two quick parts in the end. And I must thank India Today as a channel, because it has given me, this channel, this platform has given me two experiences which has changed my career. Conjoined twins were referred to me, courtesy this channel about 15, 17 years back. And the parents came, they were sick as anything. They were joined from the chest, abdomen, pelvis, genitourinary tract, liver, spleen, intestines, all as one large mass of flesh. And the parents were laborers from a district Chhapra outside Patna. They begged for euthanasia. We counseled them, we went ahead with the surgeries. India Today launched a campaign, we gathered funds for that family. Both the children are alive, living, and going and finishing school now in Bihar. That's the miracle of life. Point number two, again India Today. A year later, that is 14 years back, told me, would you like to take on an acid attack victim? I'm not taking the names because of confidentiality and sensitivity. This girl was an NCC cadet from Jharkhand. She had filed a writ in Jharkhand High Court begging for euthanasia. She had no face, no eyes, no ears, no mouth, no breasts, no neck. She was one of the worst cases of acid attack. We counseled her. India Today ran a campaign. We gathered funds for her. She underwent about 11 or 12 surgeries. She had a full facial reconstruction. She can see now. She can eat now. She's got a job in Jharkhand. She is married.
But
That's the beauty of life.
No, but these are also exceptions.
just
These
two-
are also exceptions,
just
Dr.
2
Bagai.
seconds.
Yes.
And medical science is infinite in its R&D and innovation. What was not possible 4 years back, 2 years back, is possible now. And I can tell you in the same platform, if I'm cordially invited a few years later, people who are dying now in pain and suffering because of lack of a transplant or lack of a limb, because of stem cell, regenerative medicine, and other genomics, are going to get this.
Dr. Bagai, how many people
right
have
there.
access to this medical care is my
It will
question.
reach everyone.
You know, when is my question? When will it reach everyone? Because you're talking about very expensive medical care, which is a privilege in our country. I want to bring in Nisha wants to, counter what Dr.
I
Bagai
just
is
wanted to, yes, we beg to disagree on this topic because Supreme Court has laid down very stringent points before you can either implement advance directive or you can decide on passive euthanasia. They've got a whole range, right from, the relatives, the children, then you go to the medical board, then you go to the jurisdictional magistrate, then you go to the medical board, and if the medical board refuses, then you can move the Supreme Court or High Court under 226 for passive euthanasia. Also, there is a difference, I think that what we are missing here is a terminally ill patient who's naturally, if you don't put that patient on any artificial ventilator, artificial feeding, on, as I said, the arterial line, on all that, the patient would naturally go. That is what is passive euthanasia. There are patients who are suffering pain, but not necessarily they could live for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then palliative care comes in. So that's another part of it.
Okay, I want to bring in, Guruji here also. A scenario that Nisha spoke about was that a patient knows that maybe there's life about for 2 or 3 years, but wants to go immediately, doesn't want to even wait that long. What should that patient do? And is that something that morality, ethics, religion, is that something that is going to be allowed?
I want to bring in a holistic perspective to this conversation. Somebody had his car break down, he goes to a mechanic, and the mechanic says, it will cost you 1,000 rupees for setting this car right. He said, okay, fine. So the mechanic takes a hammer, finds a particular spot, and hits it right in the engine. The car starts. He says, 1,000 rupees. And this guy says, hey, just hathoda mara? You just hit with a hammer and 1,000 rupees? For what? And the mechanic says, 1 rupee for hitting the hammer, 999 rupees to find out where exactly to hit the hammer. And that's where I want to focus on. When we speak about pain, we have to realize that the pain is experienced by the mind. And therefore, the mind has the characteristic that it makes things appear permanent, the problem appear pervasive, and the problems appear personal. So the pain at the moment of death is described in Garuda Puran to be equal to the pain of bite of 65,000 scorpions. And therefore, we have to realize that the root cause of pain is the identification. And therefore, those who are in the spiritual path, they find the secret of how to protect themselves from that pain by changing the identification from the body to that of something higher than the body. And therefore, even we have the example of Prime Minister Modi, who spends the entire 9 days of Navaratri only on water, and to not be without food is kind of painful, but because of change in identification, it is possible. So therefore, I would say that ultimately the discussion is about how to insulate and indemnify someone from pain. We have other alternatives from the spiritual tradition, which we want people to explore. And therefore, I want to conclude with 3 things, 3-point formula, ARC, A-R-C. Accept that yes, all of us have an innate desire to remain forever, eternal. Second, R is regulate, that there is a limit to which the body can be kept healthy beyond a certain limit, and the body is called Roga Mandiram. It is a temple of pain. So when you expect something, then you prepare for it, and you can insulate yourself from that pain by changing the identification from the body to that of the soul. And third is C, cultivate that ultimate expression of living an eternal life by cultivating your spiritual being. So death becomes an examination, and the disease and the pain becomes a preparation for that examination, because what has changed is now you have a clear purpose. When you have a clear purpose, then you are willing to accept the pain. And that's what the people lack in helpless situation. They lack hope. And conclaves like this, I congratulate Kalaji and her family for creating these conclaves, because what you're doing is creating source for hope for the people, and that's what the world today needs the most, which will help indemnify that pain.
You know, Guruji, I want to ask you, you spoke about the pain of the patient, and if Smriti can come in, there's not just the patient, there's a family. You know, recently there's been a case in court, and Nisha would know more about that, of a couple. Very, you know, they're very old, and they have a young son who's been in comatose for years together. They say we do not have the strength to take care of our child who's been in comatose. We do not have the financial means to take care of the child. And there are these constraints. It's a young man, but the young man is in comatose. What can the family do? What about the financial aspect of taking care of a terminally ill patient? Where does the government come in? Why should the government also come in? And should the government be coming in cases like these?
So there are several questions that
Yes.
you just asked me. I'm pleased to tell you there are people in this audience who are actively involved in Harish Rana's case. That's the boy you're talking
Yes.
about. But someone does not have to be in a persistent vegetative state for the family to be suffering. We have had people with spinal cord traumas that they've had while crossing the road, and have not been able to go for physiotherapy because they have one caregiver who can't physically take them to the physiotherapy they need. Let me just share 2 statistics with everybody in this room. 55 million Indians are pushed below the poverty line annually because of healthcare expenses, out-of-pocket healthcare expenses, catastrophic out-of-pocket
And imagine
healthcare
the cost of taking care of a terminally ill patient. It's
No,
not
so-
sardi zukham.
No,
it's
but-
way
yeah.
beyond that. It's
Yeah, so if I can just finish. So one is that. The second statistic is that even though suicide has been decriminalized, the trend is from 2014 till now in the National Crime Records Bureau that the second highest reason for suicide is someone living with a chronic advanced illness. At any given point in time, right now, there are 7 to 10 million Indians in moderate to severe pain, which will not allow them to sit in this room and be at this table having this discussion with us. I really want to underscore the fact that acceptance of death is also grace when the time comes. And what we can do is to make it as comfortable and dignified as possible and not rage against the machine in a way that is going to impoverish the family. So the illness of one person has a multi-generational impact. Their children are dropping out of school because they cannot afford education. So we need to be mindful that while we sit here and have this conversation in what I will call an ivory tower, the vast majority of our country do not have that choice.
Guruji, the majority of the country do not have the choice. The case that Smriti is referring to is of an old couple who do not have the means, and the court has turned down their plea, saying that we can't take life away from the child. He can be in comatose, but there is nothing that the court can do about it.
That's what our tradition says, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. When the entire society behaves like one family, then that support system is a very powerful means by which it gives ability to enhance the tolerance when we are in painful situation. When Yudhishthir Maharaj was asked by the Yaksha, what is the most surprising thing in this world? And he said, Ahani ahani bhutani gacchanti yamamandiram shesha sthavaramicchanti kim ascharyamatah puran. Everyone knows death is coming, but most people think that the other person will die, I will not die. So the whole conversation around death and preparation for death has to become mainstream by understanding the actual traditions we have. If somebody is in 12th standard and he has no idea about what's happening beyond 12th standard, in college, in IIT, then he does not have that purpose. So I would say that it's important for people to understand that yes, we need to provide best possible support which is required to actually handle that deadly pain, because I've been at the bedside of more than 100 people who have been at the verge of death, because when people are dying, they reach out to spiritual people, they reach out to many of us, and especially when the doctors have given up hope. And what we have seen, that people consider death as termination, but the spiritual traditions understand that death is not a termination, it is actually a transition towards a transformation. And the best tranquilizer can actually be spiritual sound vibration. So we are missing out a very, very powerful means of insulating ourselves from that pain by not giving people the opportunity to identify with something which can help them transcend pain and take the means by which they can insulate themselves from that pain. And that's what the spiritual traditions are talking about.
So suffering should be acceptable. Is that what you're saying?
We should enable people to understand suffering, prepare for suffering, and know that pain is going to be an inevitable part of life, how to prepare for it.
Nisha, suffering should be acceptable is what I understand from what Guruji is saying, that prepare yourself for the worst situation. And we've been having conversations about various scenarios. If I were to give you a situation where you have to ever make a choice of that nature.
I didn't make a choice of that nature, but
If there is a situation at all.
if I had to make a choice, I would give an advance directive for the reason that, again, we are dealing with euthanasia, which is active, which is illegal, and which is against all the spirituality and religions, as Guruji said. We are dealing with passive euthanasia. Now, that is in a PVS system, right? If somebody is completely has interstitial lung disease, the lungs have ossified, only being fed by, artificial feeding, all of it, like I said. Then in that event, to not let a person who has lived with dignity die with dignity, I think is very unfortunate. And to that extent, I say that I admire the common cause decision because it's given levels. It is not saying that a patient who is in deep pain, there should be euthanasia. No. A person who's actually suffering pain and is still very much alive and all there goes to palliative care. A PVS patient, a person who is absolutely vegetative and would die if medicine hadn't intervened, if there would be no intrusion of the ventilator, that person, a court has permitted, after a lot of stringent verifications, there can be passive euthanasia. So you have active, which is illegal. You have passive, which is legal. And I'm very, very proud of Supreme Court and its common cause decision. You do have miracles, as doctor said. And you do have pain and suffering is palliative care, which is completely different from euthanasia. It's a specialized medical treatment to deal with pain. So they're completely different levels. Now, one thing I want to say, the family has a great say in it, and so does the patient. If I, for example, were to say today that would I want to go onto a ventilator if I had cancer and there was absolutely no chance of surviving, I'd give an advance directive. And if Parliament passed the legislation of living will, I would say, kindly do not put me on the ventilator, because eventually I would have no dignity of life. To just keep me on that ventilator day after day, year after year, there is no point. So the saying is, you live with dignity, please allow me to die with dignity. And I think all religions and spirituality believes in good death and dignity.
Smriti.
Sneha, one question of yours that I didn't answer, which I would like to, is when we talk about, suffering being inevitable, I'd like to disagree that not all suffering is inevitable. We have the means to alleviate a lot of that suffering. Until such a time as we make every effort to do it, I do not think we have earned the right to talk about self-determination when we've not offered these other options. How can the government help? There is a national program for palliative care. It needs to be implemented. We're struggling with it. Less than 4% of Indians who need palliative care have access to it. It has only recently been put in the medical undergraduate curriculum. So what can we as citizens do today is make sure that this reaches that last mile so that every person who needs it has access to some degree of relief from suffering. And then let's have this conversation again.
So just a sec, Smriti is right. Supreme Court has also in common cause said that the government should strengthen palliative care in common cause.
Dr. Bagai, your intervention as far as the rights of the family is concerned, you are somebody who's saying that it should not be allowed. You're not in agreement with what the court had said in 2018 about passive euthanasia. But what about the rights of the family?
See, this is something which has to be seen in Indian context. India is not a Luxembourg or a Belgium or a France. There are 500 Luxembourgs which can fit into India. India has approximately 9 lakh allopathic doctors and 3.5 or 4 lakhs homeopathic and Ayurvedic doctors, total about 13 to 14 lakhs. But India has 10 lakhs officially counted quacks. Non-doctors, quacks who are practicing medicine. What happens in the interiors of India if this law goes like wildfire? There will be uncontrollable misery. A law, like I said, has to be sustainable and scalable. It is not only for metros. The healthcare outside metros is at a different level. Yes, of course, we need to strengthen it, and the present government is doing it. No uncertain terms. Just last night, I was researching for this talk. 90% death rate in CA pancreas. Second phase trial of mRNA vaccine has given a 75% cure. Never underestimate the power of medical science. Let us not obliviate ourselves to what the future holds.
Okay.
It is okay if we don't know something. We don't need to know everything in future. That's the beauty of life.
Okay, but
That's the beauty of living.
what about dignity in death? Guruji,
Dignity,
final comments from you,
just
please.
one line. Dignity of death
We'll really run
is respecting the patient and respecting the family. That is dignity.
Okay. What about the dignity in that of the patient? Dignity at the last few days or
Yes.
weeks of their life.
I'll just share a case study. We ran a hospice in Vrindavan for almost 15 years. And we did a lot of research from hospices across the world. And we felt, people would like to live and depart in Vrindavan, and it would be very successful. But you know what? We have to understand that everything is very cultural specific. In India, people want to depart surrounded by their family. And therefore, although we ran it with the best facilities, ultimately, we converted that into a hospital. So we have to understand that, yes, all of us will be put to test with this pain. Dignity needs to be preserved. One of the best ways in which we can lessen and decrease that pain is to provide the best kind of medical and emotional support to the patient, And if you can add the spiritual understanding of a transformed identification, nothing like it. So I'm really grateful for this excellent conversation which we had, which covered euthanasia and the right to die from different perspectives. Congratulations.
We clearly don't have a clear yes or no. It's got shades of white, it's got shades of grey, it's got shades of everything. But thank you so much for that conversation. Thank you for sharing your perspective on dignity during your last days of your life. Death in dignity is something that we need to talk about, I think, more often. Thank you so much. Thank you.